It is all an incredible distraction technique to make people think that the problems in our society, the housing crisis, the health crisis, the cost of living crisis, the causes of those problems are not those at the top, not those who profit from those crises, not the government that represents those forces, but instead the most vulnerable people. I thought it was very strange yesterday in leaders' questions. I counted no fewer than 7 times Jack Chambers, stepping in for the Taoiseach, called for a debate on our migration policy. And this is the last refuge of the scoundrel, is rather than actually coming out and argue for a position, you just say, we need to have a debate about it, suggesting that somehow you're not able to have a debate. You are able to have a debate, sure, you're the ministers, you're responsible for government policy. But it's become clear that what the government wants is not a debate. What you want is a free run to engage in dog whistling, to engage in scapegoating of asylum seekers, and for that not to be challenged. Because Simon Harris was out deliberately conflating migration numbers in general with a small number of asylum seekers who hadn't been deported. When Fintan O'Toole very accurately and precisely skewered that and exposed the misinformation that Simon Harris was engaged in, and when that was echoed and emphasised by some opposition parties, the response by Simon Harris to this debate actually happening was to accuse us of shutting down the debate. The debate isn't just you get to say whatever you want, you get to throw out your dog whistles and not be challenged on it. You will be challenged on it. But the truth is, the government doesn't actually want to significantly change aspects of our migration policy. If you did, you'd bring forward those proposals. You want to basically stick with the current migration policy, but add in some more elements of performative cruelty, to dog whistle, to scapegoat asylum seekers, and to distract from your failures in government. The idea, as it was suggested there by a Fianna Fáil TD, that by doing so we're going to cut across the rise of the far right, and that's what the evidence across Europe shows, is ridiculous. Obviously all the evidence shows that as the establishment moves to the right, reinforces the rhetoric, the analysis of the far right, you simply give them more and more space because you cede ground to them. Fintan O'Toole was absolutely correct in terms of analysing why this is happening. There's a question that hovers over Irish politics: what will the parties of power do when they start to panic about losing it? Last week, after their joint debacle in the presidential election, we got the grim answer: turn on immigrants. It's not the first time we got the grim answer. We got the grim answer in the run-up to the local elections, where Sinn Féin deserve a Fell For It award, where they tried to compete in being more anti-immigrant than the government and resulted in a disastrous election for them, because it all became about immigration. Government earlier stated that, they were overrun at that stage, that the result was that people were on the canal. That's not what happened. That's not true. There were empty beds in the system. You chose to put people on the canal because you wanted to make people homeless in order to centre the issue of immigration and say this is the problem. It is all an incredible distraction technique to make people think that the problems in our society, the housing crisis, the health crisis, the cost of living crisis, the causes of those problems are not those at the top, not those who profit from those crises, not the government that represents those forces that profit, but instead the most vulnerable people. The latest act of performative cruelty or suggestion, which has been trailed again and again and again, is the idea that you're going to charge people who are working for staying in IPAS accommodation. And it's presented as just your common sense. Why wouldn't you be paying? Well, one, why wouldn't you be paying? Because it's going to cost you more to implement it than you'll actually raise. 2, there's a very good reason that, for example, we don't charge people who stay in emergency accommodation, because we want them to be able to actually get out of this emergency accommodation. You're going to keep people in poverty in these systems just so you can have some performative cruelty. And I'd say this is the thin edge of the wedge. If you get away with doing this for asylum seekers in their emergency accommodation, are you going to do the same for homeless people? Are you going to take that horrendous attack? And I think if you set up this system, you spend millions of euros on it, you establish the principle that if you work and you have state-provided accommodation, you should pay, then all homeless people will be next. And that's why we have to stand against this divisive policy.